Welcome to the Pam Show. Today we're going to talk about something your child may have said to you. I hate you. Have you ever heard that from your child? Now, I get a lot of feedback from followers about how they handled it or how they felt when it happened. So some people said, it just really hurt my feelings. I cried. I couldn't believe my child said that to me. Other people said, I got angry right away and said, well, I hate you too. There's a lot of responses to this. We're going to talk about this today because when a child says, I hate you, they don't mean it. They don't mean it. It's emotional reaction to anger. So you may have told them they can't go somewhere or do something or have something they wanted. They get angry, and in their emotional turmoil, they yell out, I hate you. It's understandable, right? That happens. Sometimes people say things in the heat of the moment that they don't really mean. That's the case with your child. Well, let me share a personal story with you. When I was about in 10th grade, I remember one time telling my mother that. I said, I hate you. And I went and slammed the bedroom door. Very out of character for me. And I don't even remember what the situation was, but I was very angry at her. And so I reacted that way. Now, my mother did nothing, didn't say a word, didn't knock on my door, didn't react whatsoever. However, when my father got home, she must have told him because shortly after there was a knock at my door and he came in and said, your mother told me what happened. Don't you ever talk to your mother like that again. And don't you ever slam your door again. Do you understand? And I said, yes. And that was the end of it. And he said, oh, go apologize to your mother, which obviously I did. So a couple of things here. Number one, my mother should have handled that situation. Okay. We're going to get into how you can react to it in a minute, but this is one thing. My mother should have handled that situation, not waited to have my father handle it when he got home, because it makes my father the enforcer. She should have stepped in immediately and dealt with it once I was calmed down, and she was calm if she was upset by it, instead of waiting. So that's just a little sidebar there. Okay, so how can you react? What can you do whenever your child says, I hate you? Several things. One, you can just say, okay, and walk away. Don't feed it. I always say, don't feed a tantrum. Don't feed that back talk and that disrespect. You don't deserve that disrespect. Just walk away. If you're not there to receive those nasty comments, they go away because there's no engagement on your part. You're just stay calm through all of this. Just stay calm and just merely walk away. No response. Once your child has calmed down, then you guys can have a conversation about it. But that's one option. You walk away. Number two, and I did this with, I think one of my children one time said that to me, and I said, well, I love you, but I don't care for your behavior right now. Okay, I separated the child from their behavior, and I just did a Facebook Live about this the other day. Your children and their behavior are two separate things. So the behavior I didn't care for, love my child, I didn't care for the behavior. So I made that very clear. I'm not really fun. And I said, you may go to your room because I was not tolerating disrespect. That is very disrespectful. And I understand they're upset, but that doesn't give them the right to lash out at people in anger just because they're upset. They have to learn how to control that, or there's consequences to behaviors. That's life, right? You grow up, you go out in the world, you lash out at somebody, you might get a negative consequence you don't care for. But if you choose to act that way, sometimes things happen, right? So they need to learn this young. So in my case, I sent my son to his room and I said, when you're calm, we'll talk, which we did. He was angry about something. Okay. Some people choose to do this. They're like, that's disrespectful. You want to try that again? Speaking kindly. Okay. That's up to you. Me, I was like, you're out. You're done. Go to your room. I'm not putting up with that. Okay. That's an option to say, hey, let's have a do-over. Some people just say, I want to sit down with my child and say, oh my goodness, you sound upset. You want to talk about it? Me, I'm not talking to a child when they're angry because they're not hearing me. Think about yourself when you are angry for some reason at somebody and they come to calmly try to talk to you. Are you hearing them? Chances are I'd say no. You're probably going like, la, because you don't want to hear anything they have to say. It's the same thing with your child. They don't want to hear it. So that's why you tell them, go to your room and come back when you're ready calmly to discuss this. All right. So there are lots of options you can take, but you need to remember it is not personal. It's not personal. It's just part of a child's emotions coming out because children, depending on their age, don't know how to deal with that emotion. Now, let's just go back to like, because I work with 2 to 12-year-olds. That's the group I work with. Okay. 2-year-olds, I mean, I can't imagine a 2-year-old saying, I hate you. And if they do, they're mimicking that. They don't even know what that means. Even a 3 and 4-year-old, right? They're mimicking that. But at that age, it's fine to say, hey, you know what? That is not cool. I'm your parent. You don't speak to me that way. You want to try that again? Call them on it immediately. Because unless they're screaming and crying, then of course you wait till they're calmed down. Now, your older children, that's when you call them back when they're done. You have a discussion. Hey, what's going on? That's not how we talk to each other around here. Let's get to the bottom of this and see how I can help you. Now, here's the deal. They don't have to like the fact that you told them no about something. That's too bad. You're the parent, you're in charge. You know what's best for your child. They haven't had the life experience that you do. They don't have the wisdom that you do to make these decisions for their safety and their protection. They don't have to like it, but they do have to learn how to control their behavior in response to that, right? So just shouting, I hate you because they didn't get their way is unacceptable behavior. And as a parent, when you have that discussion with your child and say, let's talk about this, what happened, you need to let them know, listen, that is not cool that you talk to me that way. I'm your parent. You're supposed to show me respect. If you choose, and I always say this, choose, you say to your child, that's your choice, or if you choose, because it is their choice to react that way and act that way. If you choose, you give them that accountability, that responsibility. It's not on you, it's on them. If you choose to act that way again in the future, this is what's going to happen. And then you lay out that consequence or that boundary. If you do that again in the future, you will immediately go to your room and you're going to lose 15 minutes of screen time or whatever it is you decide. Okay. But you make it very clear to them. Here are my expectations. I'm your parent. I expect you to speak to me with respect and in a calm tone of voice. And if you choose not to, then this is what's going to be the consequence. Because in life, there are consequences for everything, positive or negative, there are still consequences. And your children have to understand those. They need to learn that they are accountable for their behaviors. They're responsible for their reactions to whatever's happening around them. And even though they may not like it, that's fine. But they have to learn how to regulate that. They don't have the right to just puke it and purge it all over everyone because they're angry. And you may know adults like that. Apparently missed that lesson when they were younger, or the parents never bothered to teach it to them how to react when they don't like something. And they're now adults who lash out, who get angry, who yell, who raise their voice when they don't get their way. And they're not fun to be around. And you certainly don't want your child to grow up to be that way, I would assume. So you start with these small lessons, and the child saying to you, I hate you, you deal with immediately. Once everyone's calm, you don't let that slide. You don't let it slide. You call them on it. So if you choose to say, hey, they're older and this is so out of character for your child, then. So remember we say communication, all behavior is communication. So if your child's acting out that way, they're communicating something to you, right? So if they're older, you might want to sit down and have that discussion and talk about it. If they're younger, you can just say, hey, we don't talk that way. Try that again. You know your children best. You know what will work best with them. But my point is you do not let that slide. That is unacceptable, disrespectful behavior. And you as a parent do not deserve that. Now, I'm assuming you are treating your children with respect as well. Okay, let's just start with that assumption that you are being respectful to your children. Okay, and then you expect that in return. All right, lesson over. Remember, hug and love your babies, and I'll see you on next episode. Bye, y'all.